Hey, it's Francis Lamb, host of The Splendid Table. Every week on our show, we talk about food and cooking and the meanings of food and cooking. We talk with the most interesting people in food about their techniques, their culture, and everything in between. Whether it's about how fried chicken took over the world or how Instagram changes the way people are actually eating. It's a food show where everyone is welcome. Come join us. You can listen to The Splendid Table wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Westholme is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. Westholme believes that when nature leads, flavor follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
Hey everyone, good morning. This is Amuse News. I'm your host, RJ. I am here via the Heritage Radio Network on an adventure through the food world. As most of you know, now we are doing conversations and a little bit of news and food conversation and a bunch of stuff. Today I'm going to be talking to Chef Erling Wu Bauer about his restaurant, Chicago restaurant Maxwell's Trading, and about his career. Really cool, interesting stuff there. So just hang out for one sec. Tomorrow I'm going to bring you some food news. I've been listening to a bunch of food related podcasts and have a lot of stuff I want to recommend. So I'm going to do that tomorrow, along with talking to one of our interns, Jess Gingrich, who produced this really interesting story about pralines and the prison system in the South, and a bunch of other stuff that's going to come out on Meat and Three, which I assume everyone knows about. Meat and Three. That episode should be out today, and I'm going to talk to Jess tomorrow. So, as always, if you see things you think that we should be talking about, hit us up on social or email. You know how to find us. Okay, I think I will just bring Chef into the conversation. Hey, how are you doing today?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for taking time to talk.
No problem at all.
So we wanted to talk to you. It's interesting because you have this. I know you have background in Southern cooking and food. I actually wanted to talk to you about New Orleans and about music, but we can talk about food also. But tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into cooking.
I mean, I've been cooking since I can remember. My mom was a food writer. My dad's from New Orleans, and it's just, as a food writer, the food is obviously kind of ever present. But as a Cajun, I mean, our blood is roux. You know what I mean? So it just kind of comes with the territory. Yeah, we're a family that talks about lunch at breakfast and dinner at lunch, and then the next day's whole meal at dinner, or the next day's 3 meals at dinner. And it's always been food's just always been life, right? Like it always is. I mean, that's an oversimplification. It's the foundation of relationships. It's the foundation of conversation. It's the foundations of travel, right? Like food is just like it's the common language between all of us in the family, And yeah, I'm half. I call it Cajun sometimes. Sometimes I call it Creole. Both of those things are actually wrong. My father was not born Catholic, so Cajun is wrong, and I don't speak Creole, so Creole's wrong. It's just the easiest things to say. My dad's from Louisiana, and I knew my grandparents on my father's side from Lafayette, Louisiana. That's where they moved. So truly Cajun country. That's a formative portion of my cooking. The other formative portions are my mother. My mother's a first generation. Sorry, she's not first generation. I'm first generation. My mother is a immigrant from China. She got over here when she was 16. And then just being what I like to call a big city American kid, where you have all of these various cultural kind of fastballs being thrown at you, and you're just happy to kind of field them and throw them into the cuisine that you cook. So that's kind of my history in food.
What was your first? Did you work at restaurants when you were young? Did you like wash dishes and wait tables and all that stuff, or did you get straight into just like I want to cook?
So I was super lucky. My mother's, I would say, best friends are Rick Bayless and Deanne Bayless, and both of them kind of took me under their wings from a very young age on, probably 6. I never worked for them, never worked in their kitchens, but just kind of had exposure to the restaurants through them, and really kind of was just incredibly blessed to be mentored by Rick and Deanne.
One thing I wanted to ask you is, like, I know that in your Chicago restaurant, and maybe in the restaurants you've worked on up to now, you take music into account. And I haven't been to any of these restaurants, but I've heard this, and I just wonder, like, being from Louisiana, being from New Orleans, being from that kind of scene, like, how do food and music work together for you in terms of how you view food and how you view cooking?
I it's the most frequent analogy used when I can't explain food, right? So let's say when talking about how to sculpt a meal out of a menu, right? And we're talking about the food making sense from beginning to end. We frequently mention albums that we love that make sense beginning to end, and albums that have great songs on them, right? So a lot of times, like right now, at the beginning, I'll be very frank with you. At the beginning of Maxwell's, I'm like, man, we're an album with a lot of great songs, but I don't think we're a great album yet. And then using that analogy to like push the staff to say, like, okay, how can we become an album that you want to listen to from beginning to end without skipping songs? Right? Like a song is a dish, a song is a break in between a dish and the next dish, a song is a cocktail, right? There's like service is kind of the tie that binds the entire album. So that's one absolute way that we think about it. And then also, like, look, with criticism and with reviews, a lot of times we're like, maybe, and this is reviews from official reviews from, we get a ton of data from, our various, I mean, you can see Google, you can see Yelp, but also our reservation system. And a lot of times it's like, maybe this album, maybe this music that we're playing isn't, I mean, a wide swath of people love it, but maybe there's some people that just don't, maybe the music's not for them. Right. And, maybe, as we go from this album to the next album, right? Like maybe we need to try to include these people. Maybe we need to, soften the music up a bit, stop playing so much acid jazz and play a little bit more pop.
I think it's really interesting how you talked about the tracks being the elements, but the album being the goal almost, or like needing to kind of assemble that. I don't know. I go back to always thinking about, perfect albums that I still listen to today. Maybe that's how you think about it. But with Maxwell's Trading, which we haven't talked about yet, how do you feel it's coming together as an album? Because what I've read, there's like, there's the cocktail piece, and there's the food, and then there's like the sustainability. It feels like a cohesive thing to me. But how do you feel about it? Is it coming together as an album?
So right now, if I were to compare us to an album, it would be The Velvet Underground. Not to say that we're even close to that, but it's just like, it's a new thought in food, right? Like we cook food, and the concept is, we call it City Food by City Kids. It's a city concept by City Kids. And it's been an incredible ride thus far, and we're consistently and will be consistently massaging at the margins to make the restaurant better. But like the album, there's two albums. There's the album of the restaurant and its construction itself, and there's the album of the meal that people have here, right? The album of the restaurant and its construction, its ambiance, its food, and its design, and its service. It's kind of like the Velvet Underground. It's kind of something that people have never heard before, and I kind of am putting that out there for people to judge. The album the other album that I'm referring to is like the meal that people have, right? Like you come in, when you walk in the doors, that's track one. When you leave, the album's over, right? That album is consistently being changed, right? Like every day at pre-shift, I'm changing little bits. The menu's changing on a regular basis, right? And what we're trying to do is two things. We're trying to remain true to who we are, right? We cook aggressively with bold flavors. We respect traditions. We research cultural traditions, and then we smash them together. Much like you do in music, right? Like like jazz was a smashing together of various other traditions. Ironically, we listen to a ton of jazz in the space. But we're consistently playing with that album and trying to make that when you walk in the door. And man, we play with everything. Like I was all over the fact that I thought the light bulb in the host stand light was too bright last week, right? Like from things that small and that simple to like, talking about the concept of casual elegance at the table and what that means, right? So there's like big 30,000 foot things, and there's little tiny, like, man, that light's too bright at the hose stand. So, it's a consistent evolution. And I think what you want from me as a customer is that you want me to consistently evolve. You want me to be here consistently making that performance better.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. I was looking at the menu, before we talk, and it feels like what you're doing, you're giving people like, choices, of course, but not too many. Like it feels like focused in a way that, there's 4 or 5 things in each category, right? It's not like a 3-page menu where you have to like really narrow down on where you're going. How do you think about that in terms of putting a menu together? Is there a goal in mind, or is it more basic of just like, have a pasta, have a meat, have a, veggie dish, like that sort of thing?
No, it's very calculated, actually. As is the size of menu. I mean, things that go into like size of menu, for example, are like, it's a very different beast to staff and run a restaurant than it was 10 years ago. And large menus require a lot of resources that we don't necessarily have the luxury of having in a restaurant anymore. Especially like, this is a single restaurant. Or we have there's no restaurant group. The restaurant is the restaurant group, right? So like, first of all, like it's a decision to make from a business perspective, the size of menu. And second of all, it's also just like, this is the concept that I want you to experience. Like, walk in, and if you want to like jump from space to space, and like if you want to jump from like menu section to menu section, you can. But like we have this style, and we have this experience that we want you to have, right? Like, we're casual about it. It's not a tasting menu, but like we are, to a degree, defining a sandbox and asking you to jump in.
That's really cool. Thanks. Can you tell us about the roof crop, which I was just sort of intrigued to hear about?
Yeah, so we have 2 partners in the building, two co-tenants, the Roof Crop and Flashpoint Innovation. The Roof Crop is a farm, and a design studio that has various rooftop farms throughout the city. 6 major ones. One obviously right above our heads here, at 1516 West Carroll. And they have two main products from a rooftop perspective. They grow cut flowers, so they're a florist, but they grow their own flowers and arrange them. So if you came in right now, you could buy in the Roof Crop's little store called Third Season. You could buy an arrangement of flowers that was actually grown in Chicago. And then, of course, they grow crops for Maxwell's trading as well. So, it is early in the year, but large parts of the steak dish, the large majority of the salmon dish outside of the salmon, the salad, the nasturtium greens, like all of these things are from the roof and come from directly above our heads. I talk about this little angel of Maxwell's trading all the time. It's this little, it's not done. It just exists in my imagination. It's this sketch of a little child that's in pencil in my head, and the roots of the roof crop kind of coming over their heads are their hair, right? And this kind of like, I call her the angel of Maxwell's trading. I have this concept of city terroir in my head, right? Like my food, those that have followed me know that my food is already uber local. I want to take it even further. Like, I was raised in the concrete jungle. I'm a child of the city, and like I want the city to actually have its own terroir, and that's what I'm going after here.
That's really cool. I know. So I'm in Philly, and I spent a lot of time here at restaurants and in New York. And I lived in Chicago for a year. I went to grad school there, and I'm from the Midwest, and I should know more about the Chicago kind of food scene, but I don't. But I want to know more. How would you describe like what's happening there, and how you all fit into kind of how the Chicago food scene is evolving?
I mean, I would tell you, outside of New York and LA, it's the only city that you can come to and have the food exceed your expectations. I'll go on record as saying that. I think what Chicago suffers from, I do genuinely think Chicago is still the best food city in the United States. What Chicago suffers from, though, is being susceptible to labels, right? Like, we're an old school city, right? Like, New York is an old school city too, but there's plenty of new school as well. Like, here in Chicago, it's like, what are you? Are you Italian? Are you Chinese? Are you, right? Are you Thai? Are you French? Are you, contemporary American? And it's hard to break out of that kind of monotony. I'm forcing it here, right? Like, I begrudgingly choose labels because I have to for, various different technological platforms. But it's American food. It's not fusion. It's truly American food. And, what the people who are pushing that are kind of pushing the bus forward here in Chicago are doing is cooking this food that really is like, might it have some cultural basis? Absolutely. But it's like really, really trying to push these ideas forward from within a culture. And that's what I'm trying to do too.
Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. In Northern Australia, there's a different approach to raising high-quality beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and Northern Territory, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. Westholme stewards 16 million acres of rangeland, guided by their natural ecosystems. They're led by a belief that if they balance the needs of their cattle with the needs of the environment, both can thrive. Westholme's team of rangeland experts and nature managers use a variety of tools to monitor and respond to the welfare of the environment, like satellites that address grass health and on-the-ground research. Cattle are happier when they have the freedom to forage and explore, so Westholme ensures that they can roam wild, foraging at will for the first 2 to 3 years of their lives. Their cows graze on native grasses like Mitchell grass, which is only found in Australia, along with dozens of other plants, herbs, and seasonal legumes. The result is a high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia and a flavor suited to complement any cuisine. Westholme believes that when nature leads, flavor follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
I gotta ask. I know that you've been in restaurants before, and you've had several projects, but that I think based on what I read, you had a little bit of a break before opening Maxwell's Trading, and I just wanted to know, like, what that kind of in between time before you opened, or as you were thinking about it, what did you want to accomplish when you got back into it? Like, was there a specific? I mean, I think you've described a lot of what the restaurant's trying to do, but were you motivated to do anything specific when you came back and wanted to open this restaurant?
Run a vibrant business where people are excited to work. I think that,
Yeah.
um, look, like I had a partnership kind of dissolve. Uh, Best wishes to them. They were great partners and continue to be a powerhouse of a company, one off hospitality here in Chicago. And then I was really lucky to be able to lean on some relationships and do a great deal of consulting for 3 years, mainly with the University of Notre Dame. And what I realized while I was doing it is how much I loved restaurants, right? Like there's something about it. Like people are like, well, what's so great about a restaurant? I'm like, go work in a restaurant on a Friday and Saturday night when everything is going right. There's nothing like it. Like there's no drugs that are as good as it. There's no, right? Like there's nothing like, maybe like a vacation, like when a vacation really hits and you're just like in this like place of just complete like connection to where you are, like you're that connected to a restaurant on a Friday,
Mm-hmm.
Saturday night when it's running well, and like you miss it, right? You miss, there's these characters in the restaurant world, and I'm not talking about characters that work here, although there are some that work here, like the young lady who makes my pasta here, like she's a character that doesn't exist in the world anywhere else, right? And there's a guy who sells mixers, right? Like he's a character that doesn't exist in the world anywhere else, and like I just love the actors in this world, and you love. The other thing is like you get into these bigger situations and you don't get to see what you produce, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I get to see it hundreds, if not thousands of times a night, and it's addictive. And then when you go to something else, you're just like, well, this just isn't the same, right? So I think what I was going for was to get back into what I love, right? And the most important thing that I did while I was gone was I really got to raise my second son, and I have 2 kids, and I still want to do this, right? Like that's I think that's the key. But I think one of my goals was to create a culture, right? And I'm not just
Yep.
saying that because these are the buzzwords that we're supposed to say. Like I really like when my employees are happy. I like being a place where employees are happy. I think they give great service when they're happy. We've succeeded largely on that goal, and I just really love that.
Cool. That's cool. So you're a 3-time James Beard Award finalist. What is the, like, what do those kinds of, I don't know, awards, accolades mean to you? If like how do they work into the way you think about your career?
Always a bridesmaid. Never a bride. That's a good question. You know, ultimately the goal, and my partner and I talk about this all the time. Ultimately, the goal is to run a restaurant that we still want to go to in 10 years, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the word iconic comes up in our head. Like maybe that's a little bit aggressive, but like to run like a bustling, busy restaurant where people propose to one another, where people, go on first dates, to where people celebrate weddings, to where people come after sad events, right? Like to be like this understory, to be this backing for people's lives, like that's what's really important to me. That's ultimately what's really important to me. And Josh and I designed this restaurant to be a restaurant where we wanted to eat, and that's really important to me. The awards are nice, right? They're nice for a lot of reasons, but they can frequently take your eyes off the prize, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really important when you remain true to yourself when you go after these awards, and I'll be very honest and say, yeah, we absolutely go after them
Mm-hmm.
because they feel good. It's really important that you do so while remaining true to yourself, which is something that I would say has taken me years to realize. Right. So, your question was, how do they work and what do they mean? They mean a lot. They're really important. I respect the organizations that run these awards. Um, Many of them do really good things for the world at large, um, and they are goals for the restaurant. They sit slightly periphery to like the long-term goal of creating just a space where people can live life. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I appreciate that. And I think like there's all that it could be really good for business too, right? Like, so there's a lot of
Right.
factors that come into it. It's not just like you as a person being celebrated, but it's like, there's a business incentive, but I could see how that would be distracting because then you're working for something else as opposed to the stuff you've been describing, which seems like
Yeah,
a
and I think
balance you have to figure out.
and I think what I'm getting at more than anything else is like I think you work for your employees first. You know, I think you work for your employees first and foremost. And like I have done this myself, and I've seen many other people do this. Is where you start working for accolades and rewards first, right? Like I really think it's important that you serve your employees first, and not your awards and accolades, and hopefully one follows the other.
Yeah, yeah. Well, keep up the great work. I have two more quick questions. One is you maybe mentioned this, but with like the characters and the employees and all the people you were talking about. But what makes you get up every day and want to do this work? Because I know it's hard and long hours, and like you mentioned, you have kids. What's inspiring you to keep doing this every day?
Um, so much, that's a this job is so hard that if I didn't wake up wanting to do it, I wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that things that really make me like, my both of my kids come at the same time at different times, just kind of run around the restaurant. That makes me really happy.
Yeah.
Um, I've had many customers tell me, man, everybody seems really happy to work here. That keeps me going. I really love the space that we've designed. I think just coming, I love being in this space, right? It's a nice office. It's a nice office to work in every day. Um, Ingredients, people, right? Like there's certain ingredients, like seeing a fresh salmon is never going to get old to me. Seeing a
Mm.
turbo is never going to get old to me. Um, Seeing people's passion pour out, even when they're so busy that like, my bar director came to me frustrated the other night. She's like, we're so busy. I'm just behind. And I'm like, what are you behind on? She's like, well, I don't have tomatoes on the menu yet. And there's stuff coming out of the ground upstairs that's not in cocktails. And like her passion to get that stuff on the menu, like
Hmm.
that drives me, right? Like she's like, man, this woman is working her butt off day in and day out. And like there's a passion for ingredients that's keeping her up, even though she's killing it, right? Like I love
Yeah.
that. I don't know if that answered the question. I'm
That's
getting to the
great.
top.
No, that's all. Those are great components. Okay, last question. What do you have like two or three desert island albums?
Depends on the day, bro.
Yeah, I know it's hard. Top 10 is difficult. What are you feeling today?
My Maxwell's mind would tell you I listen to different stuff here at the restaurant than I do at home. I listen to the most mellow stuff at home because I'm trying to turn the restaurant off. I'll tell you, like the albums that like do the best here. I'll give you one from various genres. The best jazz album here in this space is Herbie Hancock Taking Off, and that's just one of my favorite albums of all time.
Nice.
My favorite soul album, and I'll go neo soul, and I'll give you two because I have to decide between the two of them. Because I can't decide between two of them, is Lauryn Hill, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, and Erykah Badu, Baduism.
All right.
And then, when we got to get to 120 beats per minute on a Friday and Saturday, because otherwise the kitchen's just not putting food out fast enough. There's a Maceo Parker album called Maceo and His Men that's just killer. So I'll give you those four.
Nice.
And a hilarious one. And I promise you it's my last answer. My wife's girlfriends always bring her. We have a record player at home, and they bring her like joking albums from their grade school years. And I swear to God, all of those albums have made it to Maxwell's because they're so good. And the one that I play the most is TLC, like the one that has "Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls" on it. It's actually a great album.
Wow. Yeah. Like that's kind of the opposite of like going with the algorithm and the whatever, right? It's like,
right, I was like, you brought Madonna, Amy Winehouse, and TLC. Like, I'm taking all of those to work.
That is great. Okay, so the actual last thing I'm going to ask you is about the Roof Crop Foundation. You talked about the roof crop and about you've mentioned it a few times, but I understand there's a foundation also.
Yeah, there's a foundation, the Roof Crop Foundation. Our mission is to kind of just create spaces for community organizations to learn about food and learn about sustainability, and learn about productive green roofs, right? Like, we believe that green roofs don't just have to be greenwashing. We believe that green roofs can be places of sustainable practices, sustainability not only in growing crops for restaurants, but sustainability for community, right? So the kind of the actions of raising a garden in a city and seeing what they produce for various different subsidiaries is really important to what a city can be. And we want to provide spaces for, various organizations, whether they be ones that we're associated with or others, to like come experience, and come be in these very sustainable places in a big city, right?
Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for explaining that. Thanks for all the work you do. This was really fun. Let's we should talk more about music. And next time I'm in Chicago, I'd love to come by the restaurant too.
Can't wait to serve you.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Erling. And thanks, everybody. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to be back tomorrow to talk a little bit about pralines. And it's a long, complicated, and interesting and fun story. So stick around for that. But Chef, thanks so much for joining us.
Have a good one.
Hey everybody, I'm Nick Latham.
And I'm Leah Bottima.
And we're the hosts of Were You Raised by Wolves?
Each week we try to make the world a kinder, nicer place.
Well, that's the idea, at least.
I mean, we try.
Have you ever wondered what to do if you're ghosted?
Or what to do when a friend asks you to borrow money?
Or the proper way to eat Cheetos?
You know, the big questions.
So please find Were You Raised by Wolves wherever you listen.